An apology 7 decades in the making. This is The World. I'm Carol Hills, and for Marco Werman, Japan agrees to apologize and compensate South Korea's comfort women. The abuse took place decades ago, but it hasn't been forgotten.
For many South Koreans, it's like it happened yesterday.
Also, a third-grade teacher in California who sees himself in one of his undocumented students.
He is now what I was many years ago, the son of migrant workers who was very sleepy and hungry every day in the class.
Plus, a Canadian whiskey is crowned best in the world, but this Canadian connoisseur isn't buying it.
There are so many different styles out there, so how can you say that one whiskey from one country is the best in the entire world?
Those stories coming up on The World. We're going to start off the show today with a look at some lingering aspects of wars that ended long ago. The first has to do with Korea's comfort women. That's a polite euphemism. These women say they were treated as sex slaves for Japanese soldiers during World War II. It's been a highly divisive issue between the two countries for decades, but today the governments of Japan and South Korea reached a landmark agreement on how to compensate the comfort women. I spoke with reporter Jason Struther in Seoul earlier today, and he told me these women were forever marked by what happened 70 years ago.
Once these women came back after the war was over in 1945, many were shunned from their families. They were outcasts. They were seen as prostitutes. They, had trouble marrying, starting their own families. Many, I'm sure, suffered some sort of, psychological trauma from the treatment that they endured during those years. It was all very kept quiet up until the 1990s, after South Korea became a democracy, and you had civic groups start to rally around these women and press the South Korean government to get some kind of compensation from Tokyo.
This all happened, 70 years ago. Why has it been such a divisive issue for Japan and South Korea?
History certainly has gotten in the way of diplomatic ties between these two countries. Despite them being very economically interwoven, they have very shared security interests, whether that be China or North Korea. Of course, you have tens of thousands of American soldiers stationed in both countries. But the comfort women, as well as many other issues related to the early 20th century occupation of the Korean Peninsula, still are a sticking point. And for many South Koreans, it's like it happened yesterday.
Have any of the 46 surviving comfort women responded to this agreement?
Local media here have quoted some of the former comfort women saying that they are not happy with the deal. And frankly, Carol, it doesn't surprise me. These women, of course, would have a right, whether or not to say this is fair, to say whether or not they feel that Japan is really repentant now, and if this money that is supposedly on its way is sufficient enough. But there are many politically active advocacy groups that support these women. A hammer always finds a nail. And I kind of feel that these groups, their whole legitimacy is based on getting Japan to apologize for what they did, 70 years ago. It might be in their best interest not to accept an apology in order to keep their message going that Japan is not repentant.
Jason, I know the issue of the comfort women is a controversial one in South Korea for a couple different reasons. Part of this is a language issue. We still call them comfort women and not sex slaves. What is that about? Right.
Well, the South Korean government, as well as the advocacy groups that care for these women who are still alive, they have wanted the international community to refer to them as sex slaves, while in the Korean language, they're still referred to as wionbu, which literally means comfort women. And that comes from the Japanese expression that was used during the Second World War to describe these prostitutes that worked in brothels on the front lines.
So the issue seems to be whether they were literally captured and coerced or whether there was a more nuanced situation.
Exactly, Carol. And there's actually a professor in Seoul named Park Yu-ha that's facing a defamation suit because of this. She wrote in a book that some of these women were, in fact, prostitutes, that some felt that it was their patriotic duty to serve the Japanese army in brothels, that often it was Korean middlemen who...